I think for me, a great leader listens more than anything else. I think they've got to have the ability also to look in the mirror and know who they are. You can't really lead other people and try and inspire them, motivate them, assess them, promote them, demote them, fire them, hire them, unless you've got some self-awareness. So listening to others and a degree of self-awareness. If you listen, you'll become more self-aware because you'll hear the feedback. It's funny, I had lunch today with somebody who asked me something very similar. I'm really inquisitive. I'm really curious about the world. To give you an example, last week I went around a logistics business, trucking to you and me, old-fashioned lorries. And a chap who was running it was talking to me about why there are no women truck drivers. Truck drivers today, it's not about being macho and hooking up things. It's all power steering and everything. It's about logistics. It's about good conversation, good interpersonal skills with whether you're dropping things off, collecting things. But women aren't doing it. And he reckons the reason why is in truck stops, there aren't any loos. And I was really intrigued by that. You know, as an aspect of life I've never given a moment's thought to. It might sound really odd, but actually if we want to change the world, we've got to be willing to go and look for the unexpected or be prepared to be surprised. So instead of banging on about more women should learn to be truck drivers, maybe if we built a few more loos in truck stops, we get more women truck. And that's a really good example for me of how you change the world a little bit at a time. And so for me, the inspiration is constantly to be surprised and think, what can I do with that surprise? What can I do that makes things a little bit better? Either for me, selfishly, or for other people that I work with or organisations that I'm engaged with. And that for me is inspiring. I'm very conscious that I seek out new people and I want to hear their stories and how they see the world, and I try really hard to listen. Whether I do it very successfully is their judge of that rather than me. So trying to meet new people. I'm not a great reader of business books. I've got my MBA and all those good things, but that's not actually how I learn. I watch other people as well. I learned a huge amount from sitting in boardrooms or committees or on the factory floor, and also patterning from one part of my life to another part of my life. I spent 12 years working in prisons, and I learned more about how you manage and influence people there than I ever learned from my MBA, and than I've ever learned in a boardroom. Because actually, how do you get somebody who is an angry prisoner, maybe a trained killer, contract killer or a murderer, how do you get them to do something where they're incarcerated and there is no hope? So watching other people, how do they do things? Can I pattern that into part of my life? And the other important thing is to ask for feedback, ask people. I probably annoy people who I sit on boards with by always asking feedback. No doubt at the end of this talk, I will ask the audience and anyone else, what was that like? What should I have done differently? What was good? What was bad? What was indifferent? The other thing I would encourage people to do, if they've got the kind of brain that does this, is run a video while you're in a situation in your head. I spend a lot of my time being in meetings where I'm the only one dealing with, say, a management team in a business. There's no one there to give me any feedback. So I have to run the video, and afterwards I have to critique myself. So if you can start the discipline of doing that early and being honest with yourself, however you do it, some people write learning logs, some people run a video in their head, whatever phrase, but I think you've got to start that early and you've got to be prepared to keep at it. Absolutely not, because I have not chosen my career. I haven't had a life plan. I haven't had a career plan. I can absolutely tell you the most crucial, pivotal moment in my whole life, which was the arrival of my foster brother into my family. Because a pre-packed 8-year-old joining your family turns your world upside down. And however comfortable and middle class and easy it is, and however lovely he was or was not, that rocks your world when you're a 15-year-old. And I think I learned so much about human beings, about relationships, about disruption, about perseverance, about values through him coming into my life. I think that's driven everything else ever since. The most important is they need to be themselves. And that for me means that they need some awareness of who they are. And they need to be true to themselves. And that means that they need to be confident in asserting, not being aggressive, but asserting their views about certain topics. not currying favour, but thinking through what is their position on a particular topic. I think there are some basics, like I like people who make eye contact, I like people who smile, I like people who are enthusiastic, because actually you want to be with people who are energetic, fun, engaging. But more than anything else, I want to meet them. I don't want to meet a book. I don't want to meet what they think was a perfect CV. I don't want to meet what they think is a celebrity. I want to meet them. And human beings come in all shapes and sizes and all kinds of variety. Some are internally motivated, some are externally motivated, some are noisy, some are quiet. But they need to be them. And you really can tell whether you meet somebody with integrity and authenticity. It doesn't take long, particularly not in an interview situation. Not many people are good enough actors to carry off in an interview situation. So be themselves. Also, they need the confidence to know that when they're being interviewed, they're buying as well as selling. If they feel uncomfortable, if they don't hit it off with the people they're talking to, they probably don't want to be at that workplace. They probably don't want that job. So it's about actually having the maturity to recognise you're in a conversation and it's a mutual process. It's not a power play between the all-powerful and the subservient. It's the opposite. Be yourself, be confident, stride in the world, hold your head high. Learn to turn the volume down a little bit earlier. It probably took me at least a decade. And demonstrate that you listen. I was listening, but I didn't always demonstrate that I listened. And there's a huge difference between listening and hearing. And I think it takes a lot of self-discipline to listen. Because listening means you genuinely are trying to engage with the person and what they are saying to you, not what you want to hear. And I hope that comes with maturity, but if I could have learnt that earlier, I probably would have saved myself from a few problems. As a former chair of a university, I find this a fascinating question because I think different universities have different roles to play in that regard. My overarching sense is that actually there's a huge difference between schooling and education. And I think in the UK we struggle with the difference between those two. And we're becoming more transactional and are starting to believe that universities ought to be part of schooling to equip a workforce. In some respects, I agree with that. There are some technical disciplines, medicine would be an obvious one, engineering might be another one, where genuinely there are certain specific technical skills that somebody needs to learn at a higher level, at a university level, in order to fulfill the role of doctor, engineer, structural engineer, etc. I'm not sure that's the case for all disciplines, and I'm not sure that is the sole purpose of a university. I would like universities to be about the boundaries of knowledge, the boundaries of learning, in terms of, on behalf of, this sounds very grandiose, humankind, but I would also like it to be about pushing the boundaries for the individual that's exploring their own talents. So if that means somebody going and studying in depth for years and years some esoteric subject with no practical use in the world, I think universities have an important role to play in that regard. Because if that individual human being is fulfilled by that, explores that, then my view is we are all better off for that. So I think there's a dichotomy at the moment between, and those two ends of the pendulum, two ends of the spectrum, we're asking universities to do both simultaneously. And I'm not sure universities can do both simultaneously. I also think there's a problem in that because of the way we now fund undergraduate teaching, and I deliberately use the word teaching, actually the idea of the student as exploring their own talents and exploring the world or pushing at the boundaries of the world is getting lost a bit in the context of how many contact hours do I have, am I going to get a good degree, am I going to get a job? So at undergraduate level, I think we're losing sight of the self-determination of the student to explore their world and explore and shape their world. And I think that's a loss. It might make us a better economically viable country, but I think we are losing something from that. And I worry particularly that if we make the undergraduate degree all about being fit for a workplace, and only at master's level do you start to push at your own boundaries, we will be excluding socioeconomic groups that will only afford to get the 1 degree, and under the current regime, I think that's a problem. I don't think government knows how to solve this. I don't think business knows how to solve this. And I'm absolutely certain universities don't know how to solve this. But I do think universities perhaps need to think through with greater clarity their role at an undergraduate level and their role and responsibility to society as a whole, with the idea of what is the taxpayer buying, and is the university selling what the taxpayer thinks they're buying? And then at master's and postgraduate and then academic research level, again, ask yourselves where and how do we explain to the taxpayer, who funds nearly every aspect of what a university does, how do we demonstrate to the taxpayer we're delivering them value? I believe a taxpayer will be very happy for somebody to study theology for 35 years. Absolutely. But I believe taxpayers do value people exploring the world, expanding their own horizons, and so on. But you've got to explain it to the taxpayer. It's no good the university's just taking the money and doing what they want to do with it. So I think it's incumbent on all elements of society to be a bit clearer about what it's asking universities to do. And I think it's also incumbent on universities to be a bit clearer about what they think they're capable of doing, and which parts of their activities are about providing a workforce for the future, and which bits are about something very different from that. The first thing I would say to anybody is make sure you do it with a friend, as in not necessarily a friend, but you've got to do it in groups. The days of the single entrepreneur walking on water, acting like Superman are gone. The successful businesses that I see growing now start from a position of recognizing that a team and a group is much more likely to have a blend of skills that's required to run a successful business than others. And some of the crowdfunding finance businesses are really good examples of this. And if they go into it having an appreciation that their partner has different skills from them, then they will probably do the next really important thing, which is recruit people who are better than you. Absolutely recruit the top talent you can possibly get hold of, because then your business will flourish and grow, and you'll have more minds thinking about what you do better and what you do differently. And they would be my 2 top tips for any business. The third thing I would add is have a plan so that you can measure it and so that you can distinguish when you choose to divert from the plan. If you don't have a plan and you don't have it written down, you will in your head justify any decision you've made rather than critically analyse any decision that you as a group or you as a business have made. So do it with someone else, minimum of 1, preferably 2. 3 is not a crowd. Second is recruit really, really good people, the best you can possibly afford. And the third is have a plan. I think it's really hard to assess where government has an impact on entrepreneurial behaviour or business growth behaviour. Government sets the environment within which business operates, most of which for private businesses is deemed an environmental factor. You just deal with the regulations, you just get on with it. It's a bit like advertising. 50%, is supposed to be a waste of time. You just don't know which 50% it is. I think, therefore, it's really important that government does signal and signpost that it is positive about business, that it's encouraging of economic endeavour. It is, after all, just another human activity. We're very keen to sponsor and promote our Olympic athletes. So why don't we do the same for our economic athletes? Similarly, why don't we do the same for our artistic athletes? So there's something about that, and there's an important role for government there as a champion. I think government struggles to spot winners, partly because government is about large, complex, hierarchical, mechanical organisations, and by definition, start-up organisations are small, fluid, dynamic, organic. So it's the phrase I use is it's like a caterpillar and a butterfly. Large ones are, arguably the butterfly, maybe not. The DNA is identical, but in all other respects, the 2 are completely different. They move differently, they have different food, they live in different environments, and one transforms into the other. I don't think government's very good at spotting who's going to become the butterfly. And I think therefore it sort of tends to spread its largesse broadly, which as a champion is right. It should stop worrying about spotting winners. I do think it should think really hard about identifying the scale of intervention that's required if you really want to make a difference. One of the things that I think we've struggled with in the UK is really to identify the specialisms of the different bits of our regional economies. And I think we have to be more brutally honest. Where I come from in the northeast, our process industries and our ports and our engineering heritage are actually the things that make us very special and very different. So maybe we shouldn't be focusing interventions in other areas other than those 3 or 4 for the northeast of England. Down here in the southwest, there'll be other things to focus on. Aerospace would be one. Arguably, film and creative industries would be another. So I think it's about maybe having a narrow band rather than a broad band approach. And I think enterprise zones, similarly, in putting their bids forward, probably need to be a little bit more specific about what they're going to focus on. And the rest of us just have to swallow and accept that it is an experiment. It might go wrong. And just because that group over there have got some reward and prizes doesn't mean that we're inferior, and it doesn't mean we should get some too.